Evening, everybody. We're going to talk about the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, how things are looking as we get ready to kick it off in the Atlantic, and start looking at our first couple of areas of interest in the East Pac and the Atlantic. So, when we're talking about seasonal activity, we want to first thing to look at is the SST pattern across the globe because that really sets the stage for what's going to come because of the sort of the climate memory of the ocean. So, if we look at things, we have a couple things. INSO and the Atlantic are kind of the two things we look at to see what the Atlantic activity is going to be. So in the Atlantic, the main development region is kind of average overall, a little bit cooler out east, warmer in the Caribbean. We sort of do have this warm horseshoe, but it's displaced north of the area where you'd want to see for more activity because when you have warmer SSTs in the subtropics here, that tends to suppress activity in the deep tropics a little bit, increases stability here. But it's sort of a mixed look. We have a kind of a cool neutral look in the East Pacific with some cooler water here, but not a full La Nina. And then the other one we have is the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is sort of in a negative phase with cooler water here off California. And that also tends to suppress the East Pacific because you can see it's cooler water here and when the storms develop. And so those are kind of our key areas. The MDR, you also have the cooler Canary Current region here. So kind of a mixed bag, I would say. So what I wanted to do, one thing we like to do when we're talking about seasonal forecasting is to look at analogs, which are to look at past years and try to see what similar years did, and how they behaved, and that can give us some idea of what this year might hold. So I looked at these regions that PDO I talked about, ENSO, El Nino, and obviously that's a big one for the Atlantic, the MDR, and the Canary Current region, which is also strongly correlated with activity. So I calculated basically the top 10 years for each of those metrics. Basically the lowest error, best match between them, basically. And so 5 analog years popped up because three years here matched in 3 of the 4 categories here. And then when you also include, looked at the average across all the different metrics, 2 other years popped in there as well. And the 2021, 2022, 1989, 2000, and 2007. So those are the 5 years. If you look at the SST, we're going to kind of go across the board here. You can see, let's delete that. See 2022, kind of similar northward displaced horseshoe. MDR was again kind of average. The Caribbean was a little bit cooler, Eastern a little bit warmer. We had that negative PDO, maybe more of a La Nina look in 2022. So cool neutral this year, but it should behave pretty similarly in terms of low shear. So you can see why that was a good match. If we look at 2021, again, that sort of northward displaced warmth in the Atlantic. A little bit different up around Europe, but the cool PDO and cooler equatorial Pacific. So, pretty good match there. So you can see why that one matched well. If we go look at 2007, again, go to May 25th. You can see, again, kind of a cooler, cool neutral that then turned into a La Nina in the Pacific with the cool PDO look. A little bit different in the Atlantic, but you had this cooler Canary Current region and sort of an average MDR. So you can see why that one matched pretty well. 2000, as you get kind of further back, you lose some of the longer term climate signals. So these anomalies look cooler. And so, when I was doing these calculations, I removed the global mean anomaly to sort of account for the long term climate trend. But you can see, again, negative PDO, that cooler water of California is a common theme, the warmer water here in the subtropics. I think 2000 was more of a negative AMO. I think 2000 was a little bit more unfavorable than this year we'll have at this point. But obviously, we'll have to see how things evolve. And then finally, again, 1989. Again, like I said, you see just more cool overall because as you go back in time, as time has gone on, we trended warmer overall. But you can still get a feel, we have this warmth off Europe and then in the subtropics, then kind of the cool East Pacific and equator. So you can see why this match. So these 5 years are all a pretty good match overall. So if we go back and look at what they produced activity-wise, whoops, let's get rid of that. You can see that basically the average was about 113 ACE. It's a kind of a accumulated cyclone energy, a measure of total activity, average of 15 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and about 2 to 3 major hurricanes. But there was some variability. 2021 had 4 major hurricanes, was kind of a more active year. 2007 was only 2 major hurricanes, a little bit less active year. So, there's a range kind of in that average to slightly above average range, which we've talked about a lot. But what I also think I wanted to show is that one thing that these years, when you combine them, they all produced some impactful storms. 2021 had Ida, which hit Louisiana as a major. 2022 obviously had Ian and Fiona. 2000, even though it was a weaker year overall, it had Keith, a major hurricane in the Yucatan. And 2007 had Dean and Felix here in the Caribbean, Category 5 storms. And obviously in 1989 had the famous Hugo. So pretty much all of these years had at least one major hurricane landfall in the Western Hemisphere, either Mexico, Central America, or the continental United States. And so despite the fact that they were sort of average overall, there were some impacts. And that's kind of what we expect, because with the cool neutral, behaving a lot like a La Nina atmospherically, you can, we're going to go back to the spreadsheet. Let's go back to the look here. Basically, you have lower shear or easterly shear anomalies. So, during El Nino, you sort of have the opposite pattern, where you have this westerly shear that keeps stuff away from the East Coast and kind of shears stuff off. But this year, as climate models are showing, we'll likely have a window for storms to get into this sort of Southwest Atlantic and Gulf region. Could be, like I said, could be the Yucatan, could be Texas, could be Louisiana, could be Florida. We just don't know. It's going to depend on steering. It's going to depend on the Bermuda High and what the pattern over the U.S. is. But the window will be there probably, at least even if it's not a full barrage like we saw last year. And that's reflected in the NOAA outlook. The overall activity is above normal is favored, nearer to above normal. They have, a larger range because, like I said, nobody knows exactly how favorable this is going to be. And there's a lot of synoptic and other variability that can happen. But that's sort of what we're looking at, and those analogs that I came up with sort of confirm that. So now if we look at how the season's starting, the East Pacific season has kicked off. We have this area 90E, sort of a very broad disturbance here south of Mexico. This developing center is somewhere in this region. It's going to be moving off to the northwest here. You can see as it gets up to the northwest that the SST falls off. There's a pretty sharp SST gradient here. So that'll be something to keep in mind. Let's get rid of that. So if we look at the Genesis model from FSU, you can see that pretty much all of our global models are showing development. So this got is near 100% chance of developing. In terms of track, it's going to move off to the northwest here and then turn. It may turn up toward Mexico, but compared to late season storms, hopefully this will be less of a threat. Let's get rid of that. Go back to this, because it's going to peak over probably maybe as a strong tropical storm to Category 1 and then fall off. If you look at the HAFS model, you could see that this is HAFS B, the one that I've done the most work on. You can see kind of as it gets up to the northwest here, some shear and dry air really gets in there. And also, if you look at the SST, because this is a couple model, you can see that as it approaches the Baja Peninsula or just east of there, you can see we're sort of on the SST gradient, and the storm is. Let me delete that. The storm is getting a lot of inflow from this cooler SST region, and so it's going to really be a pretty stable and hostile environment there. So I don't expect this to be a very strong storm if it does move up toward Mexico, but obviously you could get some moisture and some heavy rain concerns as that lifts to the north. In the Atlantic, again, we're still kind of waiting for the season to start, and we have this MJO pulse that'll be moving in across the Pacific and into the Western Hemisphere by about June 10th or so. So that kind of middle part of June is when we will be looking at something potentially in the Atlantic. The ECMWF, in response to this, basically shows what looks like almost like a Central American gyre type circulation, or some deep southwesterly flow. Then you have the trade winds here, so you're going to have convergence and some vorticity or spin and a lot of convection in this region. Whether you get a storm that forms here on the Mexico side or in the Northwest Caribbean, you can get both. Like I said, it's still in the 7 to 10 to even 15-day range, so it's a little early to say where something might try to form. But this is the time of year, Northwest Caribbean, Southern Gulf, that's a very common place for storms to form this time of year. Sometimes they go over toward Mexico, sometimes they lift north, depending on the steering. You can see a lot of different things with this, and that's reflected in the ensemble here. This is out to 15 days, so kind of getting a little bit ways out there. But you can see we do have a pretty good signal for some more development even after this first storm, maybe in the Pacific. And then either, something kind of moving up into the Gulf or maybe staying near the Bay of Campeche. May not be anything at all. You could have something on either side. It's a little bit too early to say, but it does look like we'll get a general signal for some kind of gyre and a lot of convection near Central America as that MJO pulse moves in. So getting starting to get a little bit more active in the Western Hemisphere. We'll see what things hold over the next 10 days as we get the season started. So stay safe, everyone.